Well, welcome everyone to today's webinar titled Confronting Emerging Payment Threats. This is Brian from Strategic Treasury, and we're pleased you could join us as we discuss emerging payment threats along with strategies and technologies to safeguard your payment processes. Our speakers for today are Craig Jeffrey, founder and managing partner of Strategic Treasurer, and Paul Galloway, Senior Director Advisory Services at Strategic Treasurer. Welcome, Craig and Paul, and I'll now turn the presentation over to you.
Thanks, Brian. Welcome, everybody. I want to cover the topics that we're going to discuss today. We're going to look at trends with payments, what's going on, what we're seeing out there, as well as the existing fraud situation and how technology is being used by fraudsters today and what you can do to protect yourself against fraud, strategies that you can deploy, and what Treasury's role is when it comes to payments, systems, security, controls, followed by payment-specific training. And we'll look at front end to back end, an assessment of the payments process, tools you can use, ongoing training, penetration testing, things that are really important to combat the existing fraud situation we have today. And we'll close it with key takeaways from the webinar. This particular slide here is on payment trends, and you can see that we definitely have a shift in trends in terms of where people's focus is, growth and innovation in payments that we've had over the past 3+ years and where we think it's going to go. In the case of this particular slide, there's been a shift by organizations to faster or real-time payments processing. And with that, there are certainly things that people have to take into consideration. We expect that this trend is going to continue. Digital payments, use of AI and machine learning as part of the process, and connectivity utilizing APIs between banks and systems. We'll discuss these key considerations that are both positive aspects and areas that are vulnerabilities to an organization. With that, I'd like to turn over to Craig to talk about payment security and controls in the evolving payments landscape.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And I'll add my welcome to Brian and Paul's as well. So this is a summary of the top feature that is in the current year, the most recent survey on payments. We asked to rank 5 payment security features from the top importance to the least important of that group. And you can see that payment security and control has moved from 38% to 51%. So let me give you a couple extra data points to show what's changed. So in 2019, that was tied for the top. That was tied for the top as the biggest issue with timing. So speed was very important in 2019. It tied with payment security and control. In the intervening years, though, we can see payment security and control rising from 38% of the respondents listing as their top item to just over half. Whereas on timing, timing being the top issue, fell from 38%. It's gone all the way down to 11%. So speed has value, particularly in business cases, but as these faster payment schemes, more immediate payment schemes have come into place, that's not the top concern. And you can think about how that may be in your organization. You may have some where speed is extraordinarily important, but it may be number 2, and payment security and control, given the level of fraud and threats that have happened, has emerged as the top one. It beats out all the others for the top list. And you can download the reports and you can see this over time, and we'll have some information in the response that we provide. But cost has, for example, cost in this category has stayed around 13%. It's bumped around, but it's stayed around 13% over the survey cycle. Transparency is another area to look at. This has gone from 7% identified that as the top item. So transparency. We know when we're making payments, when we know when we're getting payments. Our trading partners know when we're paying them, and vice versa. That's moved from 7% to 15% over that time frame. So those are a couple of the key items to see what's important in the payment front in this broader context of emerging payment threat. So you can see that, but let's turn our attention to what does the landscape look like? How is that changing over time? Some interesting information there. There's both positives and susceptibilities. We didn't want to say positives and negatives, but there's certainly some areas that we're concerned about and certainly some areas that create a challenge. But on the left-hand side, what's positive? There's more payment options. Are more options good? I think so. Newer payment rails, newer payment types, newer technology that supports our payment security. Those are all helpful. So the use of AI and machine learning to protect what we're doing, newer payment rails that provide greater visibility, sometimes increased security, more information. These matter. Those are some of the significant benefits. I think too, on the evolving landscape, is there's more specific cash flow, more identification of when payments will hit. Just because you have faster payments, as an example, doesn't mean you have to pay people earlier. You can pay them at a point in time specific. That information can be shared. Now they know when it's coming. There's some value. And other elements about deeper integration, that's happening. Deeper integration with ERP systems, with treasury management systems. Banks talk about embedded banking, embedded payments. They're sticking their capabilities deeper into the systems that people transact. So banking is occurring where treasury, AP, all those activities are happening. That's in process. We're not there yet, but those are positive changes. They help the industry move better. So what are some of the susceptibilities? Faster finality leaves less time to catch and recall fraudulent payments. Speed matters, and so does finality. I know there's a number of people who say faster payments means faster fraud. And there's always the potential. It's like, okay, if it's a ACH, it may settle the next day or even, through the 4 windows that exist. So there's a little bit more time when that happens. But I don't think that faster payments translates directly to faster fraud. It certainly payments can move more quickly, but the level of security you have on those also matter. The concept of time matters, that speed matters for detecting fraud and for stopping fraud. If a payment has left the organization, speed matters greatly. Under any scenario, as soon as it's identified, you want to follow up. So there are some susceptibilities. You may have more payment channels you need to watch. So more areas of exposure, more payment rails, more places to watch. Those things matter. Criminal sophistication, and I don't want to say better criminals, but criminals that are more sophisticated, who have better tools, who are more organized, who have more funding. This matters significantly with all types of payments, but particularly digital payments. I don't know that we've reached the limit or the top on check fraud, for example, but certainly the focus and heavy attention is on digital payments. Those matter significantly. So there's certainly positives and areas that we have to be careful of, or susceptibilities. Paul, I know everybody's going to be interested in the first poll question.
Yeah, so our first poll question today is on recent security and controls. In the past 12 months, we have done the following. You can select all that apply. All of them, some of them, none of them. So we've got payment security specific training, payment security specific testing, assessment of our banking structure for security purposes, assessment for our payment processes for controls, payment process penetration test, none of the above, or unsure. And so again, you can select multiples. And, Craig, when I think about this, I think about payment rails and how long we went with, no change in payment rails. no change in the way payments are effectuated, checks, ACH, cash. And now we've got new payment rails. We have new options for selecting those particular assets to make payments or transfers. So things have really changed quite a bit.
Yeah, that's the nature of things are moving. So yeah, I'm interested to see these results. It looks like we've got quite a few back.
So it looks like majority of people have selected, three main core areas: assessment of payment process for controls, banking structure for security purposes, security specific training, followed by payment security specific testing. These are definitely areas that we've seen with other clients that is area of focus. The one that is probably less known, but some people marked it as penetration testing. And this is specific to payments, a little bit different than what our IT folks do for our organizations. So I suspect over time we're going to see more people have a focus on payment penetration testing.
Yeah,
Any other comments from you, Craig?
I mean, I agree with what you said, and just so you are aware, as a consulting firm, a firm that focuses on payments and research, I think most of you know those elements. Just across the top, where we have payment security specific training. So training focused on securing payments and testing on that. So we have a service called Secure Treasury. It's about payment security and focuses on payment processes, covers some of the other IT cybersecurity training that almost everyone has cybersecurity training, but payment security specific training. In this case, you're among a lot of good peers. We see 53% having that, which is excellent. I'm sure I know that can be higher than the general audience for people that go on that type of event. We also do assessments on the payment security process, and so this is a mini overview of what we do, so you know who's talking to you about that. We assess the overall payment environment, payment process. So that would include things like, how does your banking structure and services and security features provide security and visibility to fraud or issues? What about an end-to-end look on your payment process, from establishing payees or vendors or annuitants or employees, all the way through to reconciliation at the end? How is that information controlled and tracked? And so it tends to be quite a bit different from Sarbanes-Oxley documentation, where you're identifying preventative and detective controls. It looks at the protection of data, how that's handled, how clearly that will be identified. So that's a second service that we have. And then the payment process penetration testing is, how can your information be compromised and discovered? It's a very different type of environment than an assessment. It's seeing what information that can be pulled out of your company, from public information, maybe even from your bank. So a way of doing that. So that's a pretty, we're getting a lot of interest in payment penetration tests that we do. So those are some of the things that we do. Very interesting to see the scope. Training more than assessments generally, by a little bit. Payment pen test is happening. So some good stuff. Thanks everybody for responding to the polling questions. This is good for us to see what's going on. But yeah, Paul, synthetic media sounds like a cool term. What are we referring to here?
I'm not sure how many people are familiar with this concept, but it's the use of AI technology to basically create a deep fake and cause an organization to do something that they really don't want to do, which is send money to fraudsters, people who are trying to steal money from you. And so what I'd like to do, just to help make this slide resonate, is to give a recent example of a firm based in Hong Kong where multiple employees and the CFO were recreated using AI and appeared in a Zoom video call. They instructed employees to transfer funds. Now, this all began with a phishing attempt that was, responded to by an employee with a follow-up. What happened is that the criminals escalated the process through a group video call. And this face-to-face interaction really kind of let their guard down. And as a result, they sent out about $25 million US equivalent with 15 transfers out of the organization. And, this deep fake is something that should be really concerning to organizations. Now, there are some things that you can do to respond to something like this that will help you ensure that if you run into this situation, that you can protect the organization. So when you're on these calls, if you suspect something doesn't feel right, doesn't seem right, well, ask the people to move their heads or answer questions that would confirm their identity. These are things that they would know, that a fraudster wouldn't know. Require out-of-band confirmation from all channels. So easy way to do that is pick up the phone, call them, go to their office, talk to them. Make sure you confirm before you make any kind of transfer based on, a Zoom call like this. And then make sure you develop a confirmation or a validation list of prompts and responses. And so that would be something that fraudsters wouldn't have their hands on. It would be separate. And that way you would have something that would totally confirm that this is legit and you could execute the transaction in place. And this is something that we're going to see more and more of with fraudsters. They're becoming more sophisticated. Craig talked about it earlier, not necessarily smarter per se, but they're becoming more sophisticated. So they're learning and they're looking for opportunities on a consistent way to steal money from companies. The use of AI is one of them. And the good thing is that organizations can use AI on their side, AI machine learning, to help them detect things that are anomalies, phishing attempts, other things, business email compromise, things that don't fit the normal bill of the way you do business day to day and effectuate your payments. So use of AI and machine learning technology can also be utilized on the corporate side. The thing is that corporates need to get up to speed, because right now the fraudsters are outpacing corporates in terms of their knowledge base. So we as practitioners need to get up to speed. As Craig pointed out, we help organizations do this and think through areas of risk, where they're vulnerable, where they need to shore things up, the training, the testing. These are all things that we do on a regular basis. And so you need to make sure that you take a look at the way you do things and how you're utilizing technology to protect you against somebody that's going to use it against you. Next slide.
Yeah, just one thing on that. The law enforcement says get them to move their heads. The more I see the increases in capabilities on the deepfakes, it's like they're moving the heads. It's tracking a person. Only some people can detect maybe a different frame rate at this point. So I wonder how long that's going to move your head is going to work. I think we're probably almost out of that as well. Just as soon as it started as a way to detect it, it may have gone away quickly.
Yeah, you may be right, Craig. That's where I think this out-of-band validation, the use of prompts and responses that they wouldn't have access to or knowledge of, can help defend, and the use of technology against them as well. So that's a good point. Good point. So business email compromise or email fraud, this isn't going away. And the thing is that fraudsters are utilizing AI technology against you in this. And so they can generate highly tailored and convincing phishing emails that, when delivered, people think they're legit. The way they're written, content that's within them seems legit. So the fraudsters are using using technology, AI technology specifically, to generate emails. So they kind of amped it up. They target specific people within an organization. So they're out there learning who are the key people within an organization that have control or responsibilities for payments within the organization or authority over payments. Your treasurer, your CFO, other people in the organization. So they do this and they gain authorization, access to financial systems, maybe sensitive information. They have the ability to send out payments. They have the ability to lock up systems, control sensitive information, or share that or sell it. These are all threats. So when we think about the defense that's in play, what you want to do is you want to have regular training employees. So you train your employees and you test them. You ensure that they understand the knowledge. When we think about training, there's also this kind of impromptu type training. Something happens out there and you read a headline news article or something that in a news feed that fraudsters stole money from an organization. You can use that as a teaching moment for your people on your treasury team within your organization to keep them up to speed on what the fraudsters are doing. So this is in between training. The regular training, this is something we do really well. We have a platform that we can deploy, you can utilize, you can tailor it to your specific needs, and you can have a regular cadence plus testing of payment security. This is something we've done for a while and people are utilizing. The other thing that you can do is put in place email filters. And this, along with security systems that use AI, will help you identify anomalies and block any attempts, phishing attempts, for things that are out of the ordinary. The other area is the use of multi-factor authentication to access sensitive systems, payment platforms, anything that's tied to effectuating where a payment might go from A to B. So utilizing these types of defenses can help you minimize the risk that a fraudster convinces somebody within your organization to do something, or for them to gain access to systems within your company that could effectuate the deployment of a payment or multiple payments outside of your company to somewhere you don't want it to go. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Craig to talk about account compromise and connected devices. Right?
Yeah, Paul. And before I just flip over that, the other item that's not on here, your company may or may not have that, is data loss prevention. And so these are tools that before data is moved off of systems or as emails are sending information that may be personally identifiable, might be account number information, might be other types of confidential information, or it may be a great movement of data, something that's well in excess of what's normally moved from part of the system to another part of the system, or it's sent via emails. These are becoming much more standard configurations within things like Office 365's email system. You can turn on different aspects of data loss prevention where you store information. Those can trigger early alert that someone is stealing information. Could be banking information, could be other info that's being used to compromise. So AI has a big role in that as well. So these are all key drivers. So thanks for going through those, Paul. On the account compromise side, If I'm a criminal and I want to fool you into sending money, I've got a set of tools I use for that. And, it's susceptible to, are you fooled? Can I fool you at the time when I can get away with the money? If I can compromise an account, a login, if I can compromise your credentials, I might have more control over that. That's deemed as superior to trying to spoof you, but it can be harder. And so, I take over the account, I take over your account, I lock you out. That's considered a bad thing, right? As you try to gain control of it, the criminal continues to block you, and you feel helpless when that occurs. That's far more common than we'd like to admit, because people generally are not publishing that they have their accounts taken over, yet this is happening. So what's going on here? This is an escalation of attack, if you would. We're using artificial intelligence to probe, find weaknesses. We're using better tools to test credentials to find out what those IDs are. Then we're trying to find vulnerabilities. If you don't have some sort of method that provides an automated lockout, they'll do massive amounts of tests. So those are really significant items, and they can test those credentials. We had, one of our earliest penetration tests a number of years ago. Our pen test company had said, well, we'd identified IDs that you had, and then we were trying to access your system. We didn't get through it, but we had tested it. I'm pretty sure the number was north of 4 million attempts. They would time it. So it was after hours, they would go and test some things that we had that didn't lock out. I think it was one of our website domains. It didn't have you'd log in 5 times and it blocks that, or it extinguishes IP addresses when there's a problem. And we're like, you tested it 4 million times? And that was a fairly eye-opening what people do with programs to find and exploit a weakness. If we can't get your credentials, we'll test it until if your system doesn't block it, that's an issue. So those are some of the elements of defense as well. Bankers will tell you that multi-factor authentication is great and useful, and they are right. Listen to your bankers. They listen to their IT groups. They listen to law enforcement. Those are just additional layers. Layers help you provide security. That's a foundational principle, just like diversification helps with your investment. So too does layers help you with your protection. So these are, monitor activity, put in layers and monitor those layers. Monitor activity to identify someone poking around trying to cause a problem, just like, having a really complex password, maybe it's 16, 18 digits, means that 4 million attempts is not going to get them anywhere close to breaking through. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't block people out. So if you lock people out and they've got single digit attempts before they're locked out, that's going to make you a very hardened target. So have layers of security, layers of protection, monitor the activity, and then you can move forward. So account compromise is a challenge. System takeover attempts are real, and they have great payoff. So what about connected devices? When you read the title here, the Internet of Things, device exploitation, like you're thinking like, okay, does my camera allow for some exploitation? What about if I have a radio or a speaker that's connected? Is that creating an area for a device exploitation? Well, criminals are trying to get in through the weakest point, and they may not get in directly to the hardest, most critical resource you have, but they will try to break in, and then they'll move laterally. And when they're inside the system, it becomes easier to try to move laterally to gain access to other systems, upgrade their access, and upgrade what they can do. And so when you think about the Internet of Things devices, think about this more broadly. There was a situation where One example was a UPS, uninterruptible power supply, was connected to the network, had access, and it was just how you could manage the use of the server, but it's not the server, but the power supply. Well, that had access and a credential on the system so that other systems could control it. Well, that password wasn't very secure. That got hacked, and then the hacker was able to compromise the UPS. Well, that didn't matter, right? It was a power supply. Well, you shut off a power supply. But no, they used that to gain other credentials in the system. They were able to move over and get credentials onto the human resources system. And from there, now you're in great shape for gaining access to payment systems. And there are some payment systems in HR, namely payroll. So this idea of, connected devices, all your devices need to be connected. You may not be in IT, responsible for IT in your organization, and some of you will be on that, but there should be a segmented network or a separate network from your financial systems at work. Even at home, hopefully you have used your smart routers and browsers to set up a system for your family, a guest network, and even a network for the Internet of Things, all the stuff you connect, your TVs, your smart devices, your refrigerator, your coffee maker, your spoon. I don't know what else you connect to, but all those things that I'm sure will have smart spoons. You're biting too hard. All those items need to be connected. We need to update the firmware. You probably have a docking station that needs to be updated. Just think about all the access points that can exist. How do we protect those? What's a security assessment required to do that? And so the security assessment is, an IT-oriented items, firewalls, et cetera. A payment security process assessment is everything related to the flow of activities. And we'll talk about the treasurer as the superintendent of payment security, not the superintendent of the firewall and everything else, but a couple of those key areas. Paul, there's a question. Why don't you do the question, and I'll answer the question in the Q&A box.
Yeah. So next poll question is leading the defense. Who leads defending payment security at your organization? Treasury, APAR, finance accounting, IT, CSO, CISO, CFO, CRO, compliance, other. It's a single choice for this one, unlike the previous poll question. Single choice.
And the question is about payment security, not cyber security, but payment security. So make that selection, enter it. The question came in. Thanks, Karen. It says, what is your opinion regarding software tokens as opposed to physical bank tokens? I don't know. Using tokens for multi-factor authentication is good. I personally am much more in favor of the digital tokens from a protection standpoint. There's usually multiple layers, even on those digital tokens. If you're using, password security services or password keepers, and you're using that in conjunction with your biometrics, your face, your eye, your thumbprint, fingerprint. I think there's a lot easier than trying to lug around the number of physical tokens that exist. I'm sure there's people that would argue the other, but that's my opinion. So there it is. Thanks for the question. If people have other views, feel free to type in the chat box. You are certainly allowed to disagree.
Well, I'm certainly glad that I got rid of all my fobs years ago using a digital token. Much appreciated having that technology. But here, in response to this question, who leads the defending payment security? Treasury is up here at 46%. Not surprising seeing that, followed by IT, which, IT is definitely a critical, important point within the organization around that. I've seen many times from my experience being a practitioner between Treasury and IT, it's usually covered in those two areas. Finance and accounting, that makes sense. And you can see where it shakes out in the other areas. I don't think there's any surprises here least to me, Craig, is there anything that stands out? It seems like this is what I expected to see, which means, puts treasury in that position, superintendent of payments, superintendent of payment security, really puts them square dead center in the middle of being the defender.
Yeah, I guess I would say where it was, I know is a lot lower. Where it sits now, I'm pretty pleased that on this call it's 46%. In the future, I'd like to see that for payment security. I'd love to see that be 100%. I think this is a very good and realistic rendering, and encouraging and challenging at the same time. So yeah, thanks for everybody's responses.
Okay. So what I'd like to cover now is strategies, and these are areas that Treasury can own and help deliver on protecting the organization's own. First area is the human component, people within the organization. So this ongoing idea of ongoing training. This training you do on a regular basis, you test your employees, you make it consistent. Out-of-band validation. This is something we talked about earlier. Call your executive, call somebody who's in charge, meet them face to face, use other methods that are outside of the systems itself, where the request is being made to validate and confirm. And of course, segregation of duties. Something a lot of organizations do. Some instances we have found in some areas within organizations, unbeknownst to Treasury, doing an assessment, and we do a lot of assessments around payment flow, payment security flow, what that looks like, and we uncover areas where segregation of duties were thought to be there and they weren't actually in place. So doing an assessment is really important. So this next one, processes payment assessment and penetration testing, things that we do on a regular basis for our clients. These are really important. And this penetration testing is around payments. So it's going beyond just ensuring that your firewall's in place. It's trying to figure out, are there vulnerabilities where somebody can get into your system, take access control, and effectuate a transaction where they're sending money outside the company. Use of technology, AI, machine learning. That's something where corporates today are starting to get their arms around it, but we have a lot more to do from a practitioner standpoint. We need to educate, learn, and utilize these technologies for benefit of detecting and preventing fraud. And of course, we talked about multi-factor authentication. And then this is really key and important. Make sure that you're updating your technology in a timely manner. Anytime that there's security patches or updates are out there, you want to make sure that those updates are occurring. Then when we think about networks within the organization, you want those to be trusted networks, and anything where you're working with a third party, you want to validate with that third party. That way you can ensure that it is trusted, that it's not something where it's controlled by somebody that you don't want to be associated with, where they can get access and control to systems or to sensitive information. And of course, training and education across the organization for anybody that is tied to any part of the payment process. And, we found doing assessments, we found that organizations, even itself, thought they knew or understood how many bank accounts they actually had. And you uncover that there are bank accounts or bank relationships where business is being transacted, and the organization or Treasury didn't know or wasn't aware of it. So these assessments can help you wrap your arms around where there's some potential exposure. And of course, with the payee. Next, there's structures. You think about bank structure. You want it to be efficient. You want efficiencies across the organization. And many times we find that organizations, we do an assessment, and organizations didn't realize how many bank accounts they actually had. And they're like, man, we need to rationalize what we have. There's exposure to having too many accounts, as well as not having your accounts purposed for something specific. The use concentration accounts, CBAs, or accounts that are specific to debits or credits, whether it's collections or paying something out, disbursements. It's important to make sure you have the right structure in place that will help protect the organization. With that, I'd like to turn over to Craig, talk about how you can improve payment security and what Treasury's role is in being the superintendent of payment security.
Yeah, Paul, when you're talking about the banking structure, there's efficient not having extra points. One of the things that people do improving payment security is how do I structure my flow of funds? Do I move it to a concentration account or to a header account? Where do I have funds come into? Where can funds come out of the banking system? Those become specific accounts where you're expecting activity, and that's broken out. Some of the other areas about improving the top two on the left. What is our inventory of payment flows? Where are we exposed? Those are you're exposed to every single bank account represents a point of exposure. Money can come out of those. And so when your bankers talk to you about using debit blocks, filters, electronic pre-authorization on the ACH side, other monitoring services, please listen to them. They're not retiring because you paid a little bit of money for those services. They are doing that to protect you. They want to protect their customers. You provide them with funds, and it is very distracting to console or work with a client who lost money because they didn't put some of these services in. Put the services in. There's other things you probably need to do. And I'm speaking generally. I know a lot of people on this call, if we're focused on payment security and fraud around payments, you're probably in the leading half, at least, focused on protecting your organizations. And it's good. Your bankers are your friends and your allies to do that. So I think Paul mentioned an example. I'll give other examples. Usually when we do assessments and people say, here's how many payment flows we have, it's usually 50% to 100% or more payment flows than they expect. Now, these aren't tiny companies that they only have payroll and AP coming out of QuickBooks, for example. They've acquired companies. There's not a one-for-one match. So understanding what are the payment flows and where those exposure points are is foundational. And then the calibration aspect on the bottom, what are the biggest risks? Where do you have exposure to? What limits do you have? How would you detect that? How are they approved? What would be caught? Those are all elements of essential activities before you move through there. And the other piece is once you have an assessment, there's usually quite a long list of what you need to do to address current issues, compensating controls that will help protect you today and tomorrow. And then usually there's a list of what needs to be done to get you to be leading practice, more than commercially reasonable, something that will be commercially reasonable a year or two from now. Maybe world-class, maybe not, but something that's better than the minimum standard. I think we all realize we need to do at least the minimum standard. And so when you look at those lists of what you need to do to fix things in the immediate term and to continue to build towards a more resilient structure, it can be overwhelming. So this prioritization of what do you need to do now, next month, next quarter, so that every time you're touching a system, every quarter, every 2 months, you're making changes that strengthen your overall payment process, your ability to respond, your ability to detect. And then the second to last one on the right, the middle one on the right, is how does our posture need to change? And posture is is a mindset. It's a mindset and how we react. So if criminals are getting better, there's more points of exposure that are opening up. we have to adapt our defenses so that they improve over time. So you have to recognize that what was good last year may not be good next year, may not even be good this year. So how do we make our organizations evolve intentionally into a continuously strengthened security footprint? How often do we need to review what's going on? How do we make sure we're advancing our payment security across the board? This mindset and action set needs to change in most organizations. Some of you are in awesome positions. You're doing that, and that's excellent. Your organizations appreciate that, even if they may not thank you. It's excellent. Finally, here is the human element is essential because humans usually break processes. When fraud occurs, you're usually trying to compromise humans to give up information, to send money, or to grant some type of authorization that's not acceptable, or they didn't protect themselves and they stole your credentials and you only had one layer of security. So thinking through who needs to have payment-specific fraud training, payment security, payment-specific security training and testing. So this is vital. The human element needs to be addressed. So people, the human element, processes, the whole payment flow, how your data sits, structure of your banking accounts, and then the systems and processes together. So those 4, 5, or 6 items, depending on how you categorize those, are all essential for a secure environment. Now, both Paul and I have used the term superintendent of payments, superintendent of payment security. That's Treasury's role. We will argue that happily. It does not mean that being in charge of superintendent of payment security means that you update the firewall, you're in charge of putting patches in or which ports to open up. We're not saying that in the least, but you superintend payments. You're responsible for making sure they're done well. They're in coordination with your banking plan, your bank relationship management plan. You need to make sure that they're secure across all areas. That does not mean you do all the activities, just like the superintendent of schools does not drive the bus, clean the bathrooms, teach the classes, order supplies, provide perimeter security, all those things. But that's the role of making sure it's protected. And I'll leave this screen up for you to look at. You inventory the payments flows. You make sure everything gets updated. Those are the core responsibilities. So we're going to pop up our last slide. And I had forgotten that this is a 50-minute webinar. We are 2 minutes away from 50 minutes. So I think for those who can stand, we're going to run a little bit over. Apologies. Brian reminded me 2 minutes before he started, it was 50 minutes, and I had forgotten that. So let's go ahead and answer all of these questions. Have you experienced the following fraud attempts or losses? Have you attempted, if you know them, select all that apply. I'm going to advance the slide behind, but if you could go ahead and select those. And while you're doing that, Paul and I will talk about some of the key takeaways, but let's just give everybody just a moment. And if you can stay on just a little bit longer, that would be a personal favorite to me.
Yeah, Craig. So digital payments, we talked about, some of the positives and some of the susceptibilities. The use of AI, machine learning is quite prevalent. From a fraudster standpoint, corporates need to get up to speed. We want to be more efficient with cash flow management, working capital, reduce costs, integration with your ERP. These are positive things of digital payments, but we're susceptible when it comes to faster in terms of less time to be able to correct or stop payments. Criminals advancing, so we got to advance as well. So we need to be aware of that and use technology on behalf of our organizations. When we think about protecting payments involves doing an assessment, making sure that your employees are trained, making sure that you do penetration tests, and you got to be vigilant and consistent and communicate with your organization. That I'll turn it over to Craig.
Yeah. So on the partnering, and we'll send out the results of the the polls with this. We won't make you type things into the chat box as a way of apologizing for me running you over. But on the partner side, you have your tech group and technology firms are good partners. Your banks certainly are partners. I didn't even put that in there because I think that's so obvious, but not so obvious that I won't emphasize it verbally. Partner for assessments. If you do the assessments yourself, that may be very useful, and maybe you do that every other year, but every other year have a firm who knows how to do that, help you assess your payment flows. Well worth it, not only for the full inventory, but to identify weaknesses, have someone else come alongside you and take a look at that. On the training side, partner with trainers. If you have training already in your LMS, that's great. If it has payment security training, that's excellent. That's very rarely the case, but there are some. And then on the training side, it should be payment specific. It's a way of updating people. Make it ongoing. Make sure it has a testing component. And here is a slide. It's a fact-based slide, but also a marketing slick for our secure treasury payment security training. Very affordable. There's 27 courses, 27 videos. All those are in English. We have a series. The core series is being completed in Spanish in July. For that, there's ways of getting payment-specific security training, identifying issues, fraud cases, dissecting those, learning how to change your posture. And this is both video. There's transcripts. There's documentation for notes to download while you're listening to training to help with learning. And there's a way for you to track as the payment security superintendent of payment security. You can also track and see how many people have taken it, when they've passed, have they completed what you deem is necessary for the organization, so that you're not leaving the weakest link to the humans, that they are updated and kept on track for what goes on. And we'd love to share more information about that with you. But that's the end of our planned presentation. Thank you so much. Brian will provide some additional information now for those who can stay on just another moment.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Paul. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. For more on protecting payments, be sure to download the Payment Security and Fraud Prevention ebook by clicking the link in the chat box. Thank you, and we hope you have a good rest of the day.